A study by the London School of Economics found something that overturned one of our most basic assumptions about happiness. For most people, more social contact produces more satisfaction with life. More friends, more gatherings, more connection, more happiness. The relationship is almost universal. Except for one group. For people with higher intelligence, the relationship reversed. The more social contact they had, the less satisfied they were with their life. And the more time they spent alone, the better they felt. Not because they disliked people, not because they were broken or damaged or socially deficient, but because something about the way their mind worked made ordinary social contact feel like a cost rather than a reward, like a meal that fills the stomach without providing any nutrition. If you have ever sat in a room full of people and felt more alone than you do in an empty room, this video is about you, and what philosophy has to say about why that happens, and what, if anything, to do about it, is more honest and more useful than anything the self-help industry will ever tell you. You know the conversation. Someone asks how you are and you say fine. Not because you are fine, because the real answer would take 40 minutes and require the other person to be willing to sit with uncertainty and ambiguity and questions that have no resolution. And you already know from long experience that most people are not there for that conversation. So you say fine, and they say fine, and you talk about something that happened in the news or something someone did at work or something you watched recently, and it is pleasant enough, and you drive home feeling vaguely empty, and you are not sure whether to feel guilty about that or just accept it as a feature of who you are. This is not arrogance, please hear that clearly. The person who craves deeper conversation is not looking down at the people who don't. They are genuinely, painfully trying to connect. They want to be in the room. They want to belong. They want to stop feeling like they are standing slightly outside every gathering, watching through glass. They just cannot make themselves satisfied by the kind of connection that seems to satisfy everyone else. And the confusion about why, the inability to name what is actually happening makes it worse, because you cannot fix a problem you have not diagnosed. And most intelligent people who feel this particular loneliness have been told, implicitly or explicitly, that the problem is them, that they are too intense, too serious, too much. Philosophy has a different diagnosis, and it starts, as it often does, with a man sitting alone. Arthur Schopenhauer was one of the most brilliant and most miserable philosophers who ever lived. 19th century German, deeply influenced by Eastern philosophy, and profoundly, systematically lonely. He spent most of his adult life in a single rented room in Frankfurt. He ate alone at restaurants, placing a gold coin on the table at the beginning of each meal, with the intention of donating it to charity the first time he heard a genuinely interesting conversation at a nearby table. He died with a very large collection of gold coins. He wrote something that is among the most honest things ever put on paper about the experience of intellectual isolation. He wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is really free." That sounds like a consolation prize at first, a philosopher telling himself that his loneliness is actually freedom. But look at what he is actually saying. He is saying that the self, the actual self, not the performed self, not the self calibrated to the expectations of the room, only fully exists in solitude. Because in company, especially in company that does not match your depth, you are always translating, always compressing, always managing the gap between what you think and what the conversation can hold. That management is exhausting, and it is a kind of disappearance, a slow erosion of the self by the constant requirement to be less than you are so that others can be comfortable. Schopenhauer also wrote, "The more unintelligent a man is, the less mysterious existence seems to him, and he is not being cruel, he is making a structural observation. The person who has not looked deeply at the world is not troubled by its strangeness. They move through it with a kind of practical ease. They know what things are for. They know how conversations are supposed to go. They know what a satisfying evening looks like. The person who has looked deeply at the world is permanently slightly disturbed by it, by the fact that anything exists at all, by the gap between how people talk about their lives and what their lives actually seem to contain, by the suspicion that most of what is considered important is not important, and most of what is ignored is the only thing that matters. That person does not struggle to find friends. They struggle to find the specific, rare, almost miraculous kind of conversation that makes existence feel less strange. Now Nietzsche, because Nietzsche felt this more personally than almost any other philosopher and wrote about it more honestly. Nietzsche was alone for most of his adult life, not because he was unlikable, he was, by many accounts, charming and warm in person, but because his mind moved in a register that made sustained companionship almost impossible. He wrote letters to everyone he knew. He craved connection desperately, and again, the connection fell short of what he needed. He identified something he called the pathos of distance, the particular ache of being able to see further than the people around you, not a comfortable superiority, an uncomfortable one. The feeling of standing on a height and looking at a horizon that nobody else seems to be looking at, and not knowing whether to be grateful for the view or devastated by the isolation it produces. He wrote, "The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly." Not a boast, a lament. He is describing the experience of being misread, of having the depth of your concern mistaken for coldness, your seriousness mistaken for severity, your need for meaning mistaken for elitism. But Nietzsche also said something else, something harder to hear and more important. He said that the higher type of human being must learn to be their own company, must learn to find in solitude not just absence but presence, the presence of your own mind, your own values, your own conversation with the things that matter. He called this becoming who you are, not becoming what others need you to be, not shrinking to fit the available space, growing into the full dimensions of your own mind and learning to inhabit them without apology. The loneliness does not disappear, but it changes quality. It stops being a wound and starts being a form of integrity. Buddhism offers the most gentle and the most radical perspective. The Buddha did not talk much about intelligence. He talked about awareness, about the capacity to see things as they actually are rather than as we wish them to be or as convention says they are. And he noticed something about the development of awareness that is directly relevant here. As awareness deepens, as you begin to see more clearly the nature of impermanence, the gap between surface and depth, the degree to which most human interaction is driven by fear and desire rather than genuine presence, you become harder to satisfy by ordinary means. This is not a comfortable development. It is a necessary one, but it comes with a specific kind of loneliness that Buddhism takes seriously. The loneliness of the person who has seen through the performance but has not yet found others who have also seen through it. The Buddhist response is not to unsee. You cannot unknow what you know, and you should not want to. The conventional social ease you would have to sacrifice to get it back is not worth the cost. The response is what the tradition calls sangha, community, the specific intentional seeking of others who are engaged in the same project. Not everyone, not most people, the few, the particular, the ones who are also awake to the same things. The Buddha taught that the quality of your companionship is one of the most important conditions for your development. Not quantity, quality. One conversation that goes somewhere real is worth more than 100 that stay on the surface. The person with a deep mind does not need a large social world. They need a true one. Here is what psychology confirms. Psychologist Elaine Aron spent decades studying what she called the highly sensitive person. Her research identified a trait present in roughly 15 to 20% of the population: a deeper processing of sensory and emotional information, a greater awareness of subtleties in the environment, a tendency to think more carefully and more thoroughly about experience. Highly sensitive people, her research found, are not more fragile. They are more porous, more affected by the emotional textures of social environments, more depleted by interactions that stay on the surface, more nourished by interactions that go somewhere. They are not antisocial. They are selectively social. And the selection is not about status or exclusivity. It is about a fundamental difference in what the nervous system finds nourishing versus draining. Her research also found something important about how these people are often perceived. Because they process more carefully, because they need more time before speaking, because they find small talk genuinely uncomfortable rather than just mildly tedious, they are frequently misread as shy, cold, aloof, or arrogant. None of those are accurate. They are the social consequences of being built differently in a world that rewards the qualities that come less naturally to them. And the cumulative effect of being chronically misread, of being told, in 1,000 small ways, that the way your mind works is the problem, is a specific, layered loneliness. Not just the loneliness of not finding your people, the loneliness of not being accurately seen by anyone. So what do you actually do, concretely, today? The first practice is about reframing the solitude. Schopenhauer was right that the intelligent person often needs more time alone than is socially conventional. But there is a difference between solitude chosen and solitude endured. Take 30 minutes this week, no phone, no content, no input, and write about something you genuinely find fascinating. Not for anyone else. Not to share or perform. Write your actual thoughts about something real. This is not journaling in the therapeutic sense. It is the practice of being your own best conversationalist. It is discovering that your own company, met directly rather than avoided, can be the most interesting company available to you. The second practice is about finding true connection rather than settling for comfortable connection. Identify one person in your life, just one, who has ever said something that surprised you, who has ever gone somewhere real in conversation, even briefly. Reach out to that person this week, not with small talk, with a real question, something you are actually thinking about, something that has no easy answer. The worst that happens is the conversation stays on the surface, and you know more clearly where that relationship lives. The best that happens is you discover that the conversation you have been craving was available all along, in someone you already knew. The third practice is the Buddhist one. Begin actively looking for your Sangha, not passively hoping it will find you, actively. Join one thing, a reading group, a philosophy discussion, a writing circle, any gathering organized around ideas rather than around socializing for its own sake, and stay with it long enough to find out who is there. The people you are looking for are not at parties. They are in the places where depth is the point rather than the accident. They exist. There are more of them than you think. And they are looking for you with the same quiet desperation you have been looking for them. The loneliness you feel is not evidence of a broken social function. It is evidence of a working one. Your mind is asking for something real, something that matches it, something that does not require you to translate yourself into a simpler language before the conversation can begin. Schopenhauer sat alone in Frankfurt and heard no interesting conversations and kept his gold coins and wrote some of the most beautiful and honest philosophy in history. Nietzsche wrote letters to everyone he loved and felt the pathos of distance and kept climbing anyway. The Buddha sat under a tree and saw through everything and then spent the rest of his life looking for the people who were ready to see it too. They were not failures at connection. They were people who refused to call something connection when it wasn't, who refused to call something company when what they felt in it was alone. That refusal costs something. You know that already. You have been paying the cost for years. But the alternative is a different kind of loneliness. The loneliness of someone surrounded by people, performing belonging, saying fine when asked how they are, driving home empty night after night after night. You were not built for that. You were built for the conversation that goes somewhere, for the silence that means two people are thinking rather than no one is speaking, for the rare and irreplaceable experience of being in the presence of someone who sees what you see and does not need you to pretend you don't see it. That exists, it is rare, it is worth waiting for. And it begins the moment you stop apologizing for the mind that is looking for it.